Hi, welcome back. So today we're going to be setting up a little wireframe of what our application is going to look like. So before we actually start diving straight into it and writing a bunch of code, I actually want to lay out kind of what the process of our program is going to look like from start to finish. And the reason I do this is so that in the future I don't, lose my way and kind of go off topic and start, really going complicated and making things quite unorganized. So I like to do this before I start any of these projects so that I can kind of see where I want to be at each stage. So the first thing we're going to do is start writing our functions. Now, if you don't know what a function is, pretty much it's a way that you can pack up code in one kind of machine and then run that machine which runs that code. So for example, if you have 100 lines and you want to run that 5 times, it will be much easier to just run the function 5 times than to paste that 100 lines of code over and over again. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So the pretty basic syntax of writing a function is def for define. And then after that, you're going to type out the name of the function. So I'm going to say func here. You're going to put 2 parentheses, and then you're going to put a colon. And then in here, you're going to type out whatever you want. Now you can also pass in parameters for this. So pretty much what you can do is that, let's say we wanted to print happy birthday to someone. And we wanted to make this custom to each person. Now, let's say we have 10 people and we want to sing happy birthday through our program to 10 people. Now, obviously, you're not going to write 10 different functions. So what you can do here is, for example, if I'm writing my happy birthday function, so I'm going to say happy birthday. Instead of just writing it 10 times, so happy birthday 1, happy birthday 2, I could put in here name. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to end up using this name variable in my function. And when we call the function, which is to start running it, so when I go like this, which is the kind of syntax to run a function, I can pass in the name. So for example, I can say John. And eventually what will happen is this function will take whatever is here, which is the value passed in for name, and use it. So we'll start seeing some evidence of how that works later on. But for now, we're just going to write out all the functions without putting anything inside of them. So the first thing we want to do is an introduction. So I'm going to type out def introduction. And we don't want to pass in we don't need to pass in any arguments to this. Since of course it's an introduction, it's just going to be printing some basic text. So what we're going to do is then inside and make sure it's indented. So you just hit tab or hit the tab key once and it will make sure it's indented. So you want it to be inside this block. So pretty much just anything inside a function needs to be on the right block. So you can't just type it here. You have to hit tab to tell the program that it's running under this function. So here what I'm going to do is go ahead and type pass. And what this is going to tell Python is just ignore whatever's out here and keep going. Because if you don't type this, it's going to crash the whole program. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and print the different operations that we can do. So I'm going to go ahead and say print instructions. Now you could say that we want to do this in the introduction, but I like to keep things as separated as possible to make sure each function is doing its job. So after that, we're going to ask for the user input. Now, if you watched the video at the beginning showing what the final product looks like, you'll know that this is command-based and not option-based. So we're going to say here, get user input, okay? And we're also going to type pass, remember? The next thing we want to write is something that can parse the user's input. Now, pretty much what's going to happen is the user types in what they want and it's returning a string. But there's no actual way to tell what the user wants to do. It's just a string. So what parsing pretty much means is breaking something down into its core components. So when we're parsing the string, we're pretty much just going to get what we want from it. So in this case, we want to get the operation and the numbers. So I'm going to say parse input. And of course, this needs to take an input of string. And remember, because what we're going to be doing is calling this function, and every time we want to parse an input, we want to take in a different string every time. So we're going to do that and say pass. So now we're going to say def run operation. And what we're going to do is actually just leave this blank. Well, we're not going to leave it blank for now, but we're going to be doing something using a class. So we're going to be doing that in just a little bit. But for now, we're not going to actually define the class. So this is going to run the operation. So it's pretty much just going to check, what numbers we have, what we need, and it's going to get the returned, it's going to get our result for us. And finally, after that, it's going to take our answer from here, and it's going to say return, answer user, answer user. Of course, you can name these whatever you want. We're just going to pass in our answer, remember, because what's happening is we're running our operation, and then the number that we get from our operation, which is, for example, 1 plus 2 is 3, we're going to pass it into here, and it's going to give it back to the user. And of course, the last thing we want to do is ask again. So what this is going to do is ask the user if they want to play or run another operation. So now what we want to do is define a class, and pretty much what this class is going to do is for every operation that the user wants to run, it's going to have a set list of variables. So it'll make more sense once I start writing this out. So what I'm going to do is call the class something. So I'm going to say class operation. Okay. So what we're going to do now, and pretty much what this is, actually we don't need to put our parentheses here, just class operation. Now what we're going to do once we get in here is we're going to write something called a constructor function. So pretty much what a constructor function is when you run this class, what's going to happen is it's going to create kind of like a blueprint, and in this blueprint are going to be a bunch of different things. So for example, if you have a user class, it's going to have a set list of things that you need to make a user. So for example, a username, a password, and an email. And what happens is you can create an instance of the class, which is just kind of like a movable, workable piece of the class. And this is going to contain a specified username, password, and email. So we're going to do something using the init function. So you go underscore underscore init underscore underscore. And the first thing you want to pass in is self. Now, this is you always need to pass this in when you're creating a class. And pretty much what the self means is the instance that you're working with. So for example, if we wanted to set the user's username, you're going to say self.username. And again, don't worry about the dot, but pretty much what that means is you're going to set the username of that instance. So you always need to pass this in. The next thing we're going to do is pass in the operation that we want to run, like that, and then the list of numbers. So remember, this is just the blueprint. We're not actually creating this in real life. We're just going to be using this later on. So here what we're going to say is self dot, remember I was talking about that before. Oh, whoops, spelled that wrong. Operation. And here what we're going to do is set what we want. So it's going to be equal to operation. Now remember, self.operation and operation are two separate things. This is a pretty good example of a parameter or an argument being passed in. We're taking whatever we get from our class operation and we're passing it into here. So self.numbers, so these are the numbers attached to our instance, are going to be equal to numbers. So there we go. We have our operation class here. Now that we have that set up, what we're going to do is just finish this off and add one last function. Whoops, forgot to put up fast. And pretty much it's going to be called the main function. Now the main function is going to take everything that we wrote up here and we're going to pack it all into something nice and clean, very easy to read and easy to work with. For now, we're going to say pass. Now notice how nothing is actually being run here except the import. We can't print anything, and you actually only need one line to run this whole program, which is just like that. Main. You're calling the main function. Now for now it doesn't have anything inside it, but as we go on, it's going to have more and more things. So let's just go through and debug, make sure there's no problems in here. And you can see that no errors have been returned, there's no problems or anything. So it looks like all of these functions are ready to go. So there we go, that's it. In the next video, we're going to be moving on and we're actually going to start writing some of our program. All right, let's move on.